Hey, welcome back. Ah yes, the long box era, a time of companies trying new things, new gimmicks, and more. Since this was the late 1990s, futuristic game themes were all the rave. Mindscape tries to jump into the fray with Cyberspeed. While the game's overall performance falls short, there are and were some really interesting concepts going for it, and they deserve praise. We'll start with the overall vibes. The manual introduces you to the world via the imaginary Worldscape television channel. It proudly states that the racers and you are perfectly safe inside the vehicles, so get as violent as you want. It's a cheeky introduction, but it works. It's also one of the rare times I can recall a game telling you everyone is safe, as opposed to kill them all. Once the game boots, the television channel vibe is in full swing. Rather than static load screens, players are treated to commercial breaks in between the races. These are simple CG offerings poking fun at vintage Saturday morning cartoon classics like sugary cereal, pizza delivery, and more. Selecting the right driver and vehicle combination is where Cyberspeed starts to get interesting. Vehicles are rated on thrust, mass, speed, and shields. These stats are all based around the ship's attachment to a central laser beam. Unlike every other racing game ever made, Cyberspeed is based around the physics of a pendulum. The beam your ship is attached to is tied to your engine usage. If you swing too far away from the beam, your engines will take the brunt and slow you down. If you can manage to stay at a neutral point or stick to the inside line, you'll gain speed. With this weight concern in play, a ship's mass and thrust become vital to how you fly. Probably my favorite angle of this game mechanic is passing up other racers. Since you're all tied to the same beam, you must properly swing up and around to gain your next place. At first playthrough, things can get a bit bumpy as each ship has its own shape to sort out, but once the concept clicks, there really is a thrill to weaving in and out of traffic. More on that later. Choosing the pilot from the original selection of 8 will bring players to a commercial break, and then it's off to the races. From a visual standpoint, Cyberspeed is both profound and oversimplified all at once. The actual layout and shape of the tracks are fantastic. Since they aren't locked to the ground, Mindscape was allowed to create these giant, winding, hilly, and sometimes super curvaceous backgrounds. This appreciation fades slightly when you realize the tracks are made up of roughly the same 7 polygon textures each. That's not a bad thing, really. It's more of a curiosity into the time frame the game's development cycle had. I can also appreciate the diversity in the levels. From completely domed roller coasters to oceanic views, there's no lack of variety here. It's more shocking how well they hid the simplicity of it all. Controls are a bit cumbersome, but strictly from an attack front. Cyberspeed tries to do too many things at once, rather than focus on doing just one thing right. Your forward armament consists of a Gatling gun and a missile launcher. The bullets are unlimited, but will add to the stress of your engines. Missiles are limited and should be used with care. What's nice is that the spent ammunition is tied to the physics of the track, so both will fly around corners chasing after their targets. It's a fun angle and provides some much needed relief while trying to manage all the other controls. From the rear of the ship come defensive mines. While they're obviously a deterrent to oncoming racers, they can also be dropped to catch fired missiles. To launch them requires using the rear view camera, meaning your eyes can't see the oncoming angle changes and compensate for them. It's a strange gamble that may or may not pay off, and I use them less than I probably should have. Music is really interesting. It's a beautiful mix of techno and house tunes and doesn't interfere with the sound effects and the voiceovers. It can be easily listened to in any CD player. The announcer is fairly on par while most of the sound effects are fine. One oddity is that the game claims if one goes fast enough, they'll break the sound barrier. If I'm to believe what I heard was the sound barrier, I think it was more of a glitch they couldn't find and just made canon. It sounds more like an explosion effect randomly garbled than anything. It's really weird. With all that going for it, one would be forgiven if they didn't see where the problem lies. Remember that thrill of weaving between the racers I mentioned earlier? This is where Cyberspeed falls apart, and it falls fairly hard. There is no logic to its main race feature in regards to scoring and the rival's artificial intelligence. Let's start with the scoring system. If players earn a third place finish or higher, they'll move on to the next race, all the way to the final heat. If they fail even once to make the cutoff point, the game is over and it's back to the first race. This would be fine, extremely lenient even, except that means that there's useless points awarded for each race. The points given, 9 points for first place and so on down the line, are now meaningless. What should have happened was it only showed the top 3 point values and then the rest are listed as disqualified. Then there's at least some sort of urgency. Which then rolls into the lack of continues. If you lose, that's it. Fumble through multiple race results until you're all the way back at the title screen, and then continue till you're back to the first track. It's a harsh penalty only deflected if you remember to either manually save or acquire the password after every successful race. Finally, there's the racer's aggressive behavior. The best racing games always have the opponent players spread out evenly among the track, providing a set rhythm to how far one must be in the ranking each lap to succeed, eventually being in first place on the final lap. There's none of that here. All 7 opponents are almost always traveling in a giant pack. If one takes a turn too wide or gets bitten by an opponent's missile, it's guaranteed at least 2 to 3 racers will zoom past you instantly. Should the player not recover fast enough, it's last place. This lack of properly paced opponents, which would allow for more chances to live that amazing weaving in and out experience, is what drains the interest of competing. The gamer is simply beaten down too quickly in all facets of the race. That's not to say Cyberspeed isn't without its amusing perks. Expert racers will have to deal with the game's fairly amusing unlockable items, the purple super ship, and the cow. Yep, the cow. To properly unlock the ships, you'll need to place first in at least every other race after the third race. Once the circuit is over, the final race will be against the hidden ship. Thanks to Project Up One, players can now not only access these 2 items right away, but they can access any track with any character. You'll actually be able to play the cow if you go through with the super ship. Cyberspeed in 2022 is a lost tale in the PlayStation's long box library. The game was quickly abandoned at retail, with copies still available for $1 as late as 2005. As of this video's release date, the game can be had for under $20 shipped on eBay. I can't say you'll get $20 worth of race time with it, but for $10 it makes a great techno CD that just happens to have a mildly entertaining game thrown in. Game-Rave's official review scale sees it as an average 5 out of 10. It's a sad tale of a game full of commercials that ended up being a commercial failure. Alright guys, that does it for this episode. I really wish that Mindscape had figured out the pacing issue. If that had been ironed out, the weaving in and out and jumping track lanes, which you can do in certain stages, would have been so much more fun and inviting and almost to say competitive to like Wipeout or Wipeout XL. But as it is, it just gets old relatively fast. All right. That said, I'll see you guys later. Have a great one. Be safe. Enjoy the weather. It's finally sunny out. Take care.